Good evening, Western Standard viewers, and welcome to Hannaford, a weekly politics show of the Western Standard. It is Thursday, March the 5th. With us tonight is Rob Anderson, Chief of Staff to Premier Danielle Smith. Welcome, Mr. Anderson.
Hey, good to be here, Nigel. Nice to see you.
Last week, Premier Smith's government gave us a $9 billion deficit budget. This raises a lot of questions for Smith loyalists. A deficit was the last thing anybody expected from her when she came to office 3 years ago. But there we are. Oil prices were down, and we're $9 billion in the hole. Two questions then. First, what would it have meant for Albertans if the government had done what her critics are demanding and made the cuts it would have taken to balance the budget?
Well, look, deficits are obviously not good. It stinks. I mean, no one likes deficits. As a fiscal conservative, which Premier Smith is, and obviously her team and her cabinet are as well. It's tough. But the fact of the matter is that when Premier Smith was first elected, the average price of oil was $90, and this year it's budgeted to be $60. Each dollar difference, every single dollar of difference in the price of oil is $750 million. So we're not talking about a few hundred million. We're talking about a difference between $90 oil and $60 oil is $10-12 billion. It's massive. It's a massive difference on our bottom line. And so in order to balance the budget, you would literally have to cut essentially a third of the public service. And when we say public service, we're not talking about bureaucrats pushing paper in some building. We're talking about nurses on the front line. We're talking about paying a third less doctors. We're talking about a third less teachers. And this after 600,000 people have come here in the last few years. So that just isn't something that the vast majority of Albertans would consider. Now, we have to have a plan and to get out of this. We can't do this forever, obviously. That's not, and we can't rely on $90 oil, obviously. But the plan that the premier's put in place is a short, long, and medium term. Long term, it's grow the Heritage Fund to $250 billion. We've already doubled it in the last 4 years. And of course, when we do that, we'll be able to replace oil and gas revenue with the interest from the fund. But the key is now not to raid that heritage fund, to leave it in place, to continue to grow it as Norway and other jurisdictions have for the next 20 years or more until it's there. Medium term, it's doubling our oil and gas egress pipelines because, of course, even at lower prices, if you're selling more oil, exporting more oil, it means more revenues. That's the medium term 10-year plan, 5-10-year plan. And then the short term plan is to make sure that we hold spending well below inflation plus population growth. Obviously, we had some catch up to do with this 600,000 new individuals coming to Alberta in the last few years. We need to get a hold and get under control immigration. That means taking it over from the federal government and making sure that we don't have these absurd open border policies affecting Alberta and our budget any longer. And it means looking at some of these programs going forward and saying, look, some of these things need to be income tested. We have the most generous social programs, in the country, and we just got to make sure that they are appropriate and that they are right size, and for those who really need them. And we're not giving away taxpayer money to those that are wealthy enough that they can do fine.
So, who actually is out there who's getting money who maybe doesn't really need it?
Well, I mean, I think the piece there is that there's a lot of social supports that are intended for people that are financially not able to take care of themselves. And that's always been, conservatives agree that social safety net is important, and we need to make sure it's strong and that the money is getting to those people that do not have the financial wherewithal, or even in some cases, the mental capabilities to take care of themselves. That's what we should be targeting those programs for. Those programs are not meant for, individuals that are between two income homes that are making $300,000 or $250,000 or so forth, or have net worths in the millions, as we see in some cases. Like we can't we can't be all things to all people. We've got to focus and target our social supports to those that truly need them, and make sure that we're those that can take care of themselves do so without taxpayer expense.
I just struggling to imagine who might be have an income of $300,000 a year and qualify for support. It's are there very many people in that situation?
I'll give you an example. Senior couple that's worth several $1 million, net worth of several $1 million, and completely able to take care of themselves, still qualifying for certain senior benefits. There's examples of this, and it's just that we've let it go along so far. We've passed the hot potato so long and allowed for these things to happen. But obviously, we need to look at these things and right size them, because it's not good for taxpayers. And there's other examples of that.
So let's just talk about the situation in the Middle East and how that affects things. I looked this morning. Oil is up. This is an hour ago. It may have changed. Oil is up to $78. West Texas, US dollars. Obviously, that's better than 60, even if it isn't 90. How much does this help?
Well, I mean, obviously, it's going to help. For those of you who don't know, budgets are April 1st to March 31st. That's our fiscal year. And so for the budgets that just is coming to an end, budget 2025-26, it certainly will have an impact. If you recall, I don't have the exact budget number in front of me right now, but the deficit was going to be about $5 billion. Well, there's a chance it will have been cut in half by the end of the year. If these prices continue, you could see it in kind of the mid twos, something like that. So, which is great. Now for the budget going forward, which starts April 1st, the one that's obviously was just announced, it will have probably some impact because we're seeing forecasts being revised for the year up, anywhere from $5 to $10. So obviously that's going to have an effect. Obviously I don't think we can count on $80 oil for the entire year. I mean, if that happened, poof, we'd have a balanced budget and large surplus. But I don't think we can count on that, and we shouldn't count on that. I mean, the key is that when oil becomes 80, 85, 90, $95 a barrel for the year, what we need to do is make sure that we don't spend those large surpluses on operational, that we did what we did in 2022-23 when Premier Smith was first elected. The large $11 billion or so surplus was put into debt repayment, which is a one-time cost, of course, the Heritage Fund, one-time investment, of course. And then obviously we were going through a massive affordability challenge at that point. So some of the money was actually provided directly back to Albertans. But the key is those are all one-time investments or costs. And when we have these big surpluses, we still need to keep operational spending below inflation plus population, so that when the price of oil drops again, that we're not blowing the budget, because obviously when it goes down to say $60, I mean, we see the results, large deficits.
One last point on the immigration. It actually leads to one of the other questions on the referenda. But obviously we had a massive increase in population last year and the year before. Is that still continuing? Are people still moving in at that same rate? Or we've managed to put the brakes on a little?
I would say yes, kind of. And what I mean by that is last year, our population still grew by 2.5% in 2025. It's huge. That's a huge one-time growth rate. It's, our population is now over 5 million people. Now, 2026, we think it's slowing down a bit, mostly because we're having less temporary foreign workers coming in because the federal government has admitted that this has gotten out of control. So they've taken some steps. However, because of interprovincial migration of people already here, Alberta will still be probably the only province with substantial growth in 2026, just because these are where the jobs are. This is where the opportunity is. This is a amazing place to live. And so when people get, to Ontario, Quebec, and other places, and then they look west and say, "Ooh, that's somewhere I want to be a part of," and they come. So not only that, but we already had 600,000 people in the last 4 years. They're here now. So we have to take care of that issue. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the referendum questions, we have to decide when we're going to have temporary workers, temporary guests in our province pay for the social services that they use. We're not talking about citizens. We're not talking about permanent residents that have paid taxes for years and so forth. We're talking about people that are here as guests of our country. And I mean, I don't know about you, Nigel, but when I go travel somewhere, or if I wanted to live somewhere for 4 months or a year or whatever it was, I'm not sure any Albertan doing that would think that, oh, that government has a responsibility to pay for my healthcare, my education, my social supports, my this, that, and the other thing. That would be insane to think that. Of course, that'd be, I say that's un-Albertan to think that. And why then do we do that on the other side of the ledger and say, yeah, come to Alberta, and the moment you get here, even though you haven't paid a lick of tax, we're just going to give you all our social programs. We'll take care of you. That's a silly, economically insane thing to do, and it needs to stop. Because if we keep doing it, all we're doing is we're bankrupting ourselves, and it means poorer, or more stressed programs, education, healthcare, social supports for those Albertans that are citizens that have been here for their entire lives, or a large portion of their lives, paying taxes, and then they see not enough schools, not enough nurses, not enough doctors. So we've got to just we'll have to ignore the infantile comments of Nenshi and others that call it racist to deal with this issue. It's not. It applies to all guests, temporary residents in our province, regardless of what their backgrounds might be. And it's making sure that we attack this issue. We're taking the problem is not with immigrants. The problem is with the system, the immigration system, an open borders policies that Prime Minister Trudeau brought in, and it has caused massive strife across the country, from social disorder to stretched social services and everything.
This leads quite naturally to the question of the referendum on immigration that you proposed for later in the year. I mean, great idea, Rob. Those and the other things where the government is actually going to the people to find out what the people want. But I'm wondering, you're having it on the same day as the referendum on independence. If the answer on independence is yes, there's not much point in having an opinion on all these other things. Why not do it on 2 different days?
Well, first off, there's a couple of reasons. First off, the Stay Free Alberta petitioners have not reached their signatures yet. So there may not be a referendum unless they reach those signatures. So that's number one. Number two, a referendum is extremely expensive. A referendum is going to cost upwards of $30 million, $40 million. It costs about the same as a provincial election. Like, we're not talking about small change here. And so especially in this environment that we're in, it does not make sense to have 2 separate standalone referendums. So if the Stay Free Alberta petitioners, I think if I'm getting that right, if they get their signatures, the Premier's been very clear, that'll be added to the referendum ballot, and we'll see what Albertans have to say about it.
All right. Okay, a few moments ago, you made a reference to people coming to Alberta from central Canada, liking what they see and staying. They should. What about BC? I mean, if I wanted to get out of anywhere, I would get out of there. Property rights are up in the air, and nobody knows if they even exist anymore. So I want to ask you a little bit about our approach to that entire question of Indigenous ownership or not ownership of the land. Alberta is ceded land, held under the whole of it. It's held under one of several numbered treaties. However, in a judicial system that habitually rewrites laws and agreements from the bench, how sure are you that these treaties are going to hold up and mean anything? Of all the people who could have been Premier right now, Danielle Smith cut her political teeth on property rights. How is her government preparing for this?
Well, there's a big difference between Alberta and BC, right? The number one difference is we have very clearly worded, clearly understood treaties 6, 7, and 8, and with First Nations partners. And, there's been obviously a lot of litigation and constitutional discussions about those treaties and what they include and what they don't include and so forth. So it's very settled law in Alberta. And that's been very positive for us because it allows us to negotiate with our First Nations partners on various economic projects and so forth that have been very mutually beneficial for both Albertans and including First Nations that are located in Alberta. So it's it's been positive. BC is very different. I'm not an expert in hereditary rights and these sorts of things, so I'm not going to comment too much on that, just because I don't have a lot of knowledge of the subject matter. But they don't have the same treaties that we do that are clearly articulated. Obviously, I look at what's going on in the Lower Mainland, and yeah, it's shocking. As someone who believes that property rights are one of the key foundations of our democratic system of government, I look at what's happening there, and it's distressing. And all I can say is that I don't believe we have those same problems in Alberta. I don't believe we're going to have those same problems in Alberta. And this Premier and this government have been very clear that the protection of personal property rights is sacrosanct and will not be compromised for any reason whatsoever.
I think we should stop offering land acknowledgements. That's what I think. What do you think?
Trying to get me in trouble here, Nigel. Trying to get me in trouble here. Yeah, look.
Well, it's sort of, I won't push you on that, but it's, if you enough people enough time say, you know what, we're actually on your land. Thanks very much. It does start to give people ideas about personal ownership in a way they'd never thought of otherwise. Let me move on. I want to talk about energy security a bit. You've just talked about how many people have moved into Alberta. So now we need more power. I seem to recall that during Ms. Smith's first winter as Premier, that would be January 2023, we had a near miss brownouts when we all had a lesson that interruptible power sources like sun and wind couldn't be depended on. But we still had the Trudeau government, as it then was, demanding net zero on the grid, and we had to discuss indemnifying power generation CEOs if they went ahead and produced the power it took to keep people alive in Alberta's bitter winters. Since then, we've had another 500,000 people move in, 16% population growth in 3.5 hours. How are we doing in balancing demand for electricity with supply?
A lot better than we were, and you can tell that obviously by the power prices, which have dropped substantially since when Premier Smith took office. And obviously we had a huge issue with far too many renewables being brought on the grid, and it was obviously when you needed the renewables most in the winters and on dark nights, they weren't available. And but yet we were getting to a situation where no one was building any new baseload electricity from natural gas. It was all renewables, and of course renewables have their place, and they can be very beneficial if done properly and in the right ratio with baseload electricity. But the ratio was completely out of whack. And so obviously we took many steps that were controversial to get that ratio back to where it should be. We were successful. Obviously, the MOU signed with the federal government was a massive victory in that we were able to get them to finally abandon their the clean electricity regulations, as they call them, the net zero power regs. This has opened up a flood of new investment in natural gas-based power for AI data centers, but also just for baseload. So things are looking up. It was a disaster ready to happen. We had brownouts. We came within a hair's breadth of grid failures several times in the first couple of winters following Premier Smith's election as premier. And obviously the one we've just gone through, the winter, we're not done it yet. Obviously, this is Alberta. There's still probably another month or two left of winter, but so far nothing remotely close. And that's with 600,000 more people here. So we've done, the Premier's done a remarkable job of that file, as is Minister Newdorf. And, we expect things to calm down and get back to equilibrium as we move forward.
So how much baseload generation have we built in the last 3 years added to the grid?
Ooh, I don't have those numbers in front of me, but a lot of several thousand megawatts have come online just in the last year. I'd have to get that information for you separately.
All right. Are the coal plants capable of being resuscitated if there was the need and the will to do it?
Well, they've already been retrofitted. The ones that were, they've always been retrofitted to take natural gas. So I'm not sure there would be much reason to do that, especially because natural gas is actually, in our view, is the fuel for electricity, for the next decade, 2 decades, maybe even more. It's very cheap in Alberta, as you know. We have an ocean of it under our feet. It's clean. It's easy to stand up relatively quickly. The technology is very settled, understood. It's a really good way to create baseload power at a cheap cost for ratepayers. So I think what we're focused on is making sure that we have natural gas electricity coming into our province to help with our baseload. And then, of course, an appropriate amount of renewables in places that make sense. And then, of course, transitioning over time, probably over decades, to nuclear, which is probably the long-term solution for our electricity mix.
So last thing we want to talk about with you, Rob. We have an education system in a conservatively minded province in which this conservative government is paying a left-wing Alberta Teachers Association to churn out future NDP voters. Seriously, they are prescribing left-wing diatribes as textbooks in the teachers' training colleges. Now, this has been going on for all of the 3 years that Ms. Smith has been in government. What is the plan to deal with that?
Well, Minister, you should have Minister Nicolaides on your show, because he is doing he's already done and is continuing to make several reforms that return our classrooms to what they should be, which is institutions where our children learn reading, math, basic social studies, geography, countries, science, the things that you send your kids to school for. I mean, I have 5 boys. They've all been through the public system. Some years were great. We had fantastic teachers that followed the curriculum closely and didn't politicize anything whatsoever that we're aware of and that the kids were aware of, which is great. Those teachers are awesome. And, I have an extremely soft spot in my heart for those teachers, because they, I don't even know what their political affiliation is. And I appreciate that. I don't want to know, especially if they're teaching my kids. But yeah, we, like probably every parent in Alberta, have also had the experience of a teacher or 2 or 3 that have decided to use their position of authority to push their agenda, their personal political agenda. And that's unacceptable. That's not what they're there for. I don't know who, when you get a teacher at the beginning of the year, you don't know who they are. You don't know what their background is. You don't know what their political beliefs are. And you shouldn't have to. And that's the point. We need to get politics and, social warriors out of the classroom. That's not what the classroom is for. It's for teaching basics. And so
100% agreed.
Yeah, so I think
get that point through to Gil McGowan as he tries to lead the working people of Alberta in strident revolt against the fascist government that governs the province, right?
Well, look,
May the 29th, all out on strike or whatever the game is.
Hey, free speech. Go fill your boots, Gil.
Yeah.
It's not. I don't think we. Gil McGowan's kind of embarrassed himself over the last couple of years with his silliness and idle threats and so forth. But if he wants to have a big protest, that's certainly his right, and it's the right of anybody who wants to join in, and that's okay. I mean, that's part of free speech. We can. What's the term is, like you may not agree with the word the other side says, but we need to be willing to defend the right to say it. So go ahead.
That's what we think. I don't know whether they're so emphatic themselves, but look, we're out of time. I'm sorry. This is great stuff. Appreciate you coming on the show, Rob.
Pleasure.
I just want to thank you.
Yeah, pleasure, Nigel. Always good to see you.
Well, yeah, you too. For the Western Standard, I'm Nigel Hannaford.